The gods have returned. Zeus, Hades, Aphrodite, the whole pantheon, back from whatever ethereal vacation dimension they'd been languishing in. Only this time, due to a cosmic hiccup, or perhaps divine bureaucratic error, they materialized at a height of exactly 2 inches, give or take a millimeter. More critically, upon their grandiose re-entry onto the mortal plane, the gods found themselves stationed not atop the marble glory of Mt Olympus, but atop the significantly less marble glory of Brandon Styles' gaming table. This particular folding monstrosity resided in his bedroom at 413 Robin Street, approximately 9,000 miles from Greece, give or take a Mediterranean Sea. Brandon and his friends were deep in the throes of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, and Tyler had just achieved the impossible. He'd rolled a natural 20. The teenage barbarian leapt from his seat with such force that his chair nearly achieved liftoff, fist-pumping the air in a display of primal victory that would have made Hercules jealous. "Critical hit, bitches!" These were the first mortal words to grace the divine ears of Olympus in 2.5 millennia. The gods would later agree this did not bode well for civilization's progress. Jeff the Dungeon Master, a title that sounded far more menacing than the pimply sophomore wielding it, was rattling the percentile dice around in his fist like bones in a necromancer's pouch, preparing to determine the fate of Tyler's legendary strike. "It could be anything," Jeff intoned with all the dramatic gravitas his cracking, pubescent voice could muster. "From double damage to decapitation." "Giants!" Zeus bellowed in ancient Greek, his voice somehow maintaining its authority, despite sounding like a particularly irate chipmunk. The gods immediately shifted into defensive formation, a practiced maneuver honed over millennia of combat. Backs pressed together, they formed a protective circle that would have been far more impressive if it wasn't roughly the circumference of a mayonnaise jar lid. Hermes, blessed with the keenest eyes on Olympus, and the fastest feet, though that was less relevant when you couldn't reach the table's edge before arthritis set in, spotted the giant lurking behind a great painted wall. A monster manual, if we're being technical. The behemoth was preparing to release a pair of blood-red boulders directly toward their position. "Incoming!" Hermes shouted, his words tumbling over each other at divine speed. Zeus reacted with the lightning-quick reflexes that had made him king of gods, and, less admirably, king of questionable romantic decisions. He hurled a bolt of electricity approximately the size of a mortal's toothpick, which struck the first boulder mid-flight, deflecting it directly into Brandon's forehead with a satisfying thwack. Meanwhile, Poseidon, who'd been complaining about the lack of ocean for the past 30 seconds, pacified the second boulder by throwing his magic fishing net over it. The die clattered harmlessly to the table, showing a disappointing 3. Brandon barely registered the assault, his teenage brain struggling to process the fact that his plastic D&D miniatures had suddenly developed both sentience and surprisingly good combat tactics. He and his 4 friends sat frozen, mouths agape, eyes wide as saucers, specifically the saucers from Brandon's mom's good china set. They were paralyzed as thoroughly as if someone had cast Hold Person, which, given the circumstances, wasn't entirely out of the question. The gods interpreted the giant's gaping maws as a decidedly bad omen. This assessment was particularly concerning to Dionysus, who hadn't had a proper drink in literally eons, and whose divine blood alcohol level had dropped to dangerously sober levels. "They look hungry, guys," he cautioned, eyeing the cavernous mouths with the wariness of someone who'd seen too many friends end up as ambrosia. "They're freaking colossal," added Demeter, who had some professional experience with scale, being the goddess of agriculture and all. "They look scared to me," countered Ares, lowering his visor with a metallic clink and raising his broadsword to a threatening angle. At 2 inches tall, it looked like an ornate letter opener, but the principle remained. "Guys!" Athena interjected, her voice cutting through the divine bickering with the precision of her spear. "Look around you." She gestured toward a scroll the size of an area rug, the character sheet of Bife the Barbarian, scourge of the northern wastes, he who deadlifts. "These giants are more than just freaking huge, they are literate." The implications hung heavy in the air. Literate giants were exponentially more dangerous than the regular smash first think never variety. Aphrodite, cursed with olfactory senses more refined than a French perfumer's, was suddenly struck by a powerful wave of teenage giant BO, a nauseating cocktail of Axe body spray, Dorito dust, and hormonal confusion. The assault on her divine nostrils triggered an uncontrollable sneezing fit. "Achoo! Achoo! Ach!" The giants snapped out of their paralysis faster than a rogue rolling for initiative. "Sorry," Aphrodite managed between sniffles, her perfect nose crinkling in disgust. "Charge!" Zeus roared. Because when you're 2 inches tall and facing 5 teenage giants, tactical retreat is simply not on brand. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes, though the gods would later inflate this to nearly an hour when recounting the tale to each other. The gods emerged victorious, though they were as surprised by their win as they were impressed with their own performance. Zeus magnanimously commended Ares for his astute detection of the giant's fear, conveniently forgetting that he'd called it stupid optimism 30 seconds earlier. In retrospect, the swift surrender made perfect sense, even though these giants possessed the raw power to give the gods a severely challenging fight, possibly even a TPK in gaming terms. They were clearly familiar with Olympian legends. It had been roughly 2,500 years since the gods had departed, give or take a few Olympiads. But apparently their reputation for absolute victory preceded them. Plus, these weren't exactly full-sized giants. They were adolescents, as became painfully clear when the one calling himself Tyler actually cried and wet his pants at the sound of Zeus's battle cry. In Tyler's defense, Zeus's battle cry is genuinely terrifying, even when delivered at a pitch only dogs and dolphins can fully appreciate. After accepting the giant's unconditional surrender, which mostly involved Brandon promising not to put them back in the miniatures case, Hermes stepped forward as intermediary. His divine gift of understanding all languages extended, fortunately, to modern English, gamer slang, and meme references. Through careful negotiation, and one very awkward 15 minutes, where Aphrodite had to explain to Ares that shipping did not involve Poseidon, the gods learned many startling things. These giants genuinely believed themselves to be human, regular-sized, average, garden-variety Homo sapiens. They had apparently taken over the entire world, all of it, every continent. Their numbers reached into the billions. These particular specimens, Brandon, Jeff, Tyler, Dan, and Micah, belonged to a specialized subset of humanity known as nerds, possessing unusually broad insight into classical mythology, memorized entirely through a series of fantasy novels, video games, and one surprisingly accurate Wikipedia binge. This shared knowledge base made maintaining peace far easier, much to Ari's eternal chagrin. He'd been hoping for at least a few more skirmishes, maybe a light siege. The giants, for their part, had been more than happy to accommodate their new miniature deities. The gods soon adapted to their circumstances with the flexibility that comes from millennia of existence, claiming domains appropriate to their reduced stature. Hades now rules the basement, which admittedly isn't that different from the underworld. It's dark, smells vaguely of mildew, and Brandon's dad rarely ventures down there. Zeus commands the roof, where he can brood dramatically while surveying his reduced kingdom, and occasionally zapping squirrels who disrespect him. Demeter tends the garden, finally able to micromanage individual tomato plants with the attention to detail she'd always craved. Dionysus has claimed the liquor cabinet, where he's discovered that human alcohol is delightfully potent at his current size. A single drop of brandy, and he's composing poetry for 3 days straight. Poseidon reigns over the fish tank, having finally achieved his dream of being the biggest fish in the pond. The beta fish disagrees, but lacks the verbal capacity to mount a formal challenge. Ares hunts giant mice and other vermin with the savage efficiency of a tiny, immortal exterminator. He's never been happier. Aphrodite dispenses relationship advice, though her suggestions of just be devastatingly beautiful have proven less helpful than she anticipated. Athena assists Brandon with his homework and risk strategies, finally appreciating students who actually listen to her counsel. Looking at you, Odysseus. Every Tuesday evening, the gods gather together atop Brandon's gaming table, complete with battle mat and scattered Cheeto dust, and join the giants in acting out all the infinite possibilities of imagination. It's different from the old days, certainly. Smaller in scale, literally and figuratively. But there's something refreshing about rolling dice to determine fate instead of simply declaring it from on high. Plus, the snacks are excellent. Now, if only Aphrodite can teach these lads about the benefits of deodorant. She's the goddess of love and beauty, not miracles, though at this point, she's willing to try anything. Even prayer. Ironic, isn't it?